My name is Russell Hedrick, and you're watching Top Crop. Welcome to the farm. This one here we call the bottom of the barrel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about our soil testing, what we're looking at with our fertility approaches, and picking up a piece of ground that's it's pretty tough. It's the only way to say it. So this farm here we actually picked up last year from a neighboring farmer. It came open for bid. We leased it, and this year on this farm we've got a few different trials going on. We're looking at fertility management on the planter, whether it's 2x2, in furrow, different products. This field here on this side of the farm, we're actually doing wide row soybeans. The other side we're doing narrow row, looking at what our yield response is going to be and weed response. This farm actually has some resistant weeds on it, mare's tail. But just look forward to diving into some of our soil tests and showing you what we've got. So when we first start out on every farm, a lot of farmers we found out really don't dive too deep into their soil sampling. One of the issues that we have found out is conventional soil test. If you take like where Dan's at, they're probably using Bray, which Olson was developed in the 1940s, Bray was developed in the 1960s, and the Millick test was developed in the 1980s. How many farmers get in their tractors and carry around a rotary dial phone? Nobody. But our soil tests haven't changed since the rotary dial phone was around, which is absolutely just mind-blowing to me. So what we like to do on our farm is we pull a conventional test, which for this area would be the Millick 3. Then we utilize a new test called the Haney test, and we can just kind of show some comparisons. So the Millick 3 test, which is what our state average is, it uses an extractant that would kind of represent hydrochloric acid. And the problem with that is it doesn't rain hydrochloric acid. And if you're going to look at how much fertility is there, by using an extractant that's too hard, we're actually going to get a false read on what our fertility availability is going to be to the plant. So if we're looking at this farm that we're on here, we're on HL1. If we come over here to HL1, we're going to see that it's showing really high phosphorus, medium potassium. Calcium is a little bit on the low side, but we should expect that just being how this farm was cared for. And so if we look at recommendations for this farm, it's saying for 65 bushel beans, we need 65 pounds of P and 60 pounds of K. Then if we look at the Haney test, the Haney test is actually calling for a little bit more phosphorus and less potassium. So if you really want to look at the bottom line and what the crop is actually going to need, the Haney test extractant uses water and 3 organic acids. It's to mimic acids that we're going to see produced by the plants that we're growing. So it's actually giving us a more representative read on how the ground's functioning. What are we going to see available in fertility? Sometimes it calls for less, sometimes it calls for more. But instead of putting on additional potash that we don't need, we bump up our phosphorus a little bit, and we're able to balance this out and actually grow a better plant that yields better without throwing additional money at it. One of the other things that we like about the Haney test is down here. So we actually have a live read on microbes in the ground with the Haney test. So we have a soil respiration. We found out in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that the ground actually is alive. Microbes consume organic material, and when they do that, they release CO2 gas. So when we read the CO2 gas, we can actually see how much is that ground working. So right now this ground is functioning at 66%. This is percent MAC. So this is the food source, the organic carbon, and they're consuming about 66% of it. That's not terrible, that's not great. We have farms that range anywhere from, on the low spectrum, typically our normal farms are in the 80s and 90s. Some of our highest functioning farms that we get a lot of yield off of, we'll see them in the 150 to 200s. So the organic carbon on this test is your checking account. And this is what you're paying to release nutrients. If you're seeing percent MAC over 100%, and you're using all your checking account, which would be the organic carbon, you'll actually see microbial mass start breaking down organic matter. Some of our highest functioning ground, we can see a really good gain over the winter with cover crops and increasing organic matter. And then throughout the growing season, through our soil test, we'll actually see that organic matter start to break down if we see percent MAC over 100%. But these are just some of the different things that we look at on the Haney test. The biggest thing for us is nitrogen. Most testing does not test for nitrogen at all, but the Haney test looks at nitrate, ammonium, and organic nitrogen. This is a bean field, so we're not really needing a nitrogen credit, but to give you an idea, we picked up 47.4 pounds of nitrogen with the Haney test that we wouldn't have gotten in a conventional soil sample. And as a farmer, that's saving me about $48 an acre on nitrogen alone. So you take a Midwest farmer that's farming 1,000 acres of corn, they're going to save around $47,000 on nitrogen if they were seeing the same results on that test. $47,000 is enough to look at a different soil test.